Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, students of second year. This is continuation of online teaching as advised by Worthy Vice Chancellor Professor Khalid Masood Gondal. Today we are starting nervous system, that is the gift of Almighty Allah, due to which we are called Ashraf al Makhlukat, highest creatures in the universe. At the end of lecture, the students will be able to know how brain help us to move us as a social animal. What are the general functions, physiological and anatomical divisions of the nervous system? What are different coverings and cells of brain and spinal cord? And how we can bridge this knowledge with pathology, medicine, and neurosurgery. We came to know from nothing else, but it's the brain that comes joys, delights, sorrows, griefs, laughter, sports, despondency, lamentations, and by this, in an special manner, we acquire wisdom and knowledge and see and hear and know what are foul, what are fair, what are good, what are bad, what are sweet, and what are unsavory. It is the human nature to be curious about how we see. Remember, forget. In short, every thought, every action, reasoning, and emotion reflects activity of the nervous system by the same organ. We become mad and delirious, terrors and fears assail us. In these ways, I am of the opinion that the nervous system exercises the greatest power in human beings. Nervous system is the communication and control system that allows an organism to interact in appropriate ways with its environment Environment is external and internal. External means world outside the body. Internal means components and cavities of the body. Nervous system communicates by electrical and chemical signals, and these signals are rapid and specific to produce desired effect. These signals usually cause immediate response. The human nervous system is most complex product of biological evolution that performs three overlapping functions. The first function is sensory function. To perform this function, nervous system uses millions of receptors that gather information from inside and outside the body and monitor changes in them. This gathered information is called sensory input. The second function of the nervous system is processing and integration. The sensory input is analyzed in the brain, and brain processes that and interprets sensory input and decides what to be done at each moment. And this process is called integration. Due to this ability, nervous system has the capability to store information in the form of memory. The third overlapping function of the nervous system is motor function, by which an effect is produced. By activating either muscle cells or glands. The beautiful example of this is while driving. When we see a red light, the brain integrates that information and understands that red light means stop, and your feet goes for break. To perform these functions, the nervous system is divided into two physiological divisions. The first one is central nervous system. Central nervous system is again divided into brain and spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord, they receive information and produce effect. The second division of nervous system includes the peripheral nervous system, that is composed of sensory division that conveys message to the brain, and efferent division that performs the function of the brain, or you can say the effect generated in the brain. As we have mentioned that the nervous system is composed of central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. And peripheral nervous system is composed of efferent division and sensory division. The sensory division works by perceiving changes in the tissues. And these changes in the tissues are within the body. They are sensed by the sensory receptors, or the signal from outside is sensed by the sensory receptors. They are millions in number. When sensory receptors they become stimulated, a receptor potential is produced in them. That receptor potential, when reaches threshold value, it excites action potential. It produces action potential that moves along the sensory neurons to the brain. In the brain, then that information is processed and interpreted, and effect is produced, and that effect is produced through the efferent division of the peripheral nervous system. The efferent neurons, they are of two types: autonomic neurons and the somatic neurons. The somatic motor neurons, they control skeletal muscles, while the autonomic neurons, they are of two types: sympathetic and parasympathetic type of neurons. Usually they work in opposite to each other. The sympathetic and parasympathetic neurons, they control activity of the cardiac muscles. On the other hand, they also communicate with the neurons of the enteric nervous system, that is also part of the peripheral nervous system. By communicating with the neurons of the enteric nervous system, they basically control the activity of the smooth muscles, exocrine glands, some endocrine glands and cells, and some adipose tissues. And by controlling activity of all these cells, basically they produce tissue response. Both brain and spinal cord are suspended in the cerebrospinal fluid. Brain and spinal cord are protected by the bones of the skull and the vertebral column. Brain and spinal cord does not come in direct contact with the overlying bones, as it is protected by three membranes, or you can say three coverings of the brains, that are called meninges. The first meningeal layer is the dura mater. It is the outermost layer. Dura matter is the outermost covering. The word dura matter is derived from Latin that means hard mother, and being hard, it basically forms a tough, inelastic barrier around the brain and spinal cord. Just under the dura mater, there lies arachnoid membrane. Arachnoid membrane, its appearance and consistency is like of spider web, and it is also derived from Greek word. There is normally no space between the dura mater and arachnoid matter. Subdural space is present below the dura mater. Whenever it is, whenever the blood vessels present in the subdural space are ruptured, there occurs collection of fluid or blood in the subdural space, and the condition is called subdural hematoma. This collection of fluid that is called subdural hematoma, it produces effects on the brain and disturbs its function. The innermost layer is pia matter. Pia means gentle mother, and it surrounds the brain. Between the pia matter and arachnoid matter, there is a space that is called subarachnoid space that contains a salty fluid that is called cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid provides nourishment to the brain structures. The arteries present in the subarachnoid space, they traverse the pia mater and passes into the brain structures. There are two types of cells present in the nervous system. The one are called neurons. Neurons are the functional unit of nervous system, and in between the neurons sporting cells called glial cells are present. There are four types of glial cells in the central nervous system, while two types of glial cells are present in the peripheral nervous system. The first type of glial cells in the central nervous system are ependymal cells, and these cells, they create a barrier between the compartments of the brain. Secondly, along with astrocytes, they are source of neuronal stem cells. The second variety of sporting cells are the astrocytes. As the name indicates, they are star-shaped cells that provide substrates for ATP production. They help to form blood-brain barrier that is highly selective barrier for movement of ions and molecules. The astrocytes they also secrete neurotrophic factors. These factors support growth, number two, they support in the survival, number three, they help in the differentiation of developing and mature cells. The fourth function of the astrocytes is that they take up potassium, water, and neurotransmitters through blood-brain barrier. The third type of cells in the central nervous system are the microglial cells. They are modified immune cells and they belong to monocyte lineage. They act as scavengers. The fourth type of cells that are present in the central nervous system are the oligodendrocytes, and they form myelin sheath that helps in a rapid transmission of signals along neurons. The two types of cells in the peripheral nervous system are the Schwann cells that form myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system as compared to oligodendrocytes that form myelin sheath in the central nervous system. The difference between the oligodendrocytes and the Schwann cells is that the oligodendrocytes, if they are damaged, they cannot reform the myelin sheath. And due to this, the neurons in the central nervous system, they cannot regenerate. While the Schwann cells, they form myelin sheath when the neurons are injured in the peripheral nervous system. And due to this, they can help in the regeneration of neurons. The second important function of Schwann cells is that they secrete neurotrophic factors that help in the growth, survival, and differentiation of developing and mature neurons. The second category of supporting cells in the peripheral nervous system are the satellite cells. And these satellite cells, they support the cell bodies. Clinical correlation of this lecture. Subdural hematoma and its effects. Subdural hematoma means the collection of fluid in the brain. When it is collected, it basically suppresses the brain structures. And this condition is treated by drilling a hole in cranial cavity. The second clinical correlation of this lecture is inflammation of the meninges, that is called meningitis. For the diagnosis of meningitis, basically the cerebrospinal fluid is drained and it helps in the diagnosis of three different types of meningitis. Number one, bacterial. Number two, tuberculous. Number three, viral meningitis. The next is blood-brain barrier. As we have mentioned, it is highly selective and it is formed by three structures. Number one, the endothelial cells of the capillary walls. Number two, astrocytes. Number three, pericytes present in the basement membrane of the capillaries. Blood-brain barrier. It allows passive and selective transport of ions and nutrients across the blood-brain barrier. It also restricts the movement of pathogens that can damage brain. Next are the astrocytomas. They develop from the astrocytes. They are fatal in almost 90% of cases. Astrocytomas, they produce three effects. Number one, seizures. Number two, headache. Number three, nausea. Unfortunately, these tend to grow and become aggressive. Thank you very much, my dear students, for being with us.